Okay. Well, it's filming now whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, dear.
Take one.
Hello everybody, welcome to Boswell Book Company. It is our 1,934th day in business, and I can't exactly say when. I should have looked up exactly what day it was during the last time Michael Zummo was in the store for the first book, Democracy Revival Awakening, and I blame myself for not knowing. But he continues to be a developer and programmer. We are continuing to be the bookstore that is hosting the event for the newest book, Democracy Revival Retribution. Not everybody gets this, but you're in both the Terra Green flyer and the brand new silver yellow flyer. If you're interested in some of the other events we've got coming up, these just came in today. I walked over to Clark to get them, and we are happy to tell you about them. So, but that all pales in comparison to tonight's event. So let's give them a big hand. Thank you very much.
Daniel was saying, Boswell Book Company is a real supporter of local authors. It makes it possible for people like me to come in and to be able to present to you guys and talk about my book. There's a lot higher of an entry point to try to do it at like the chains and things. So I love supporting what they have here, and I'm honored to be here. So I wanted to welcome everybody. Yes, I actually have index cards, just in case. As Daniel said, this is my second book. I was actually here in August of last year. So it's been not even a year since the first book came out. As he had said, I'm Michael Zummo, and I live here in Milwaukee, and I work over at Johnson Controls with some people in the audience, or will again with some people in the audience that are returning to Johnson Controls. One of the things that might be obvious about me is I'm a video gamer, and I love science fiction. I love all of the Star Wars and Star Trek and Battlestar Galacticas, and I used this joke on Monday, but I'm star agnostic as far as that goes. I also own my own publishing company. I'm all self-published. I created it because I found that it was just too difficult to try to get into the market, trying to get an agent and a publisher. It was taking years. There's like exclusive relationships you have to have with people, and they lock it up. And so through my own publishing company, I've been able to create the ebook, the audio book using talent from LA, and the softcover editions, as well as all of the marketing materials, as well as the sales and distribution. So it's kind of and the writing. So kind of a army there. But the most important job that I have is actually being the dad of that little guy right there. So today we're all here to kind of celebrate the launch of book number 2, Retribution. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to say what an amazing year it's been since the first one came out. Right after the launch in August, I was able to go to the Chicago Comic-Con in 2013 and have a booth there, where right next to mine was Stan Lee and his foundation. So I was able to give him kind of it was autographed, but also dedicated. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. I'm just thanking him for all the worlds that he inspired, including mine. And as a result, the Stanley Foundation actually picked up my series and started to promote it and distribute it, which was phenomenal. The first book is also won a runners-up in science fiction for 2014 in Reader's Choice. I hit the Amazon top 20 in science fiction. I have an amazing fan base of people who are helping me to understand what's good and could be improved in the series, which is great. And on Monday, Derek and I were both on The Morning Blend, which is on the Channel 4 television station. So it's been a crazy, crazy year. But even though I'm saying that I've done a lot of things, those things don't happen in a bubble. And I have some thank yous that I need to say to people that actually help make all of this stuff possible, because I still am only one person. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Arlene Robinson. She's an amazing editor. She lives down in Atlanta, Georgia. She's also my writing mentor. She's the one who kind of took a very awfully formed script, poorly formed script back in 2003 and helped transform it into the books that you guys are seeing now. There's Glenn Clovis, who's the master behind the 3D renderings that you see here. He's amazing in terms of his talent and patience with me, because we went through quite a few iterations. I wanted to thank Pat Conley, my sister Elizabeth, and my father for all of the countless readings and rereadings they did of my book and giving feedback early on. To my mom for all the moral support that she's provided.
And
for,
having you.
And having me. And to my little guy for all the inspiration that he provides. In addition, there's a number of people that were amazing sounding boards for me that really helped to shape things like the book cover, for instance. And those people, actually there's quite a few here today. Well, you always raise your hand, but we have Jesse and Tim, Nathan, who's actually not here, my friends Kim and Moretez, Brad, who's over there, and Dan Proust, who's not here. You know, and what?
It wasn't always the... Is that the cover that you made or the cover... Didn't another person change the cover?
Yeah, well, so this was actually a little different initially, and we have the original artwork over on the table. That's one of the giveaways tonight. And, you know, originally it was going to have more of a zoomed out version of it, and what I'm calling my sounding board team actually helped say, well, you know, if you actually do this blocking, it's much more dramatic and stuff like that. So, I mean, honestly, the cover that you see here is because of the input that I've had from them. I'd also like to give a very special thanks to Ryan J. For opening doors and for helping me look great. You know, he helped pick out all the fashions, even some of the stuff I have today. And for inspiring me with your success. And just for the record, Kim and Moretez just walked in. They're the part of my sounding board that I was saying thank you to. So just to go over, I know a couple people actually haven't heard me go on and on about my series, so I'll just give a quick overview of it. The Mock Revival is considered a sci-fi space opera. It's aimed at the YA audience and older. It's kind of a Star Wars meets X-Men vibe, as Ryan J would say. And to me, though, it's not just about the high story arc of, you know, big baddies rolling through the galaxy, but really about the interpersonal dynamics of the characters and who they are and what they struggle with and how they come together to help each other against a common foe. And so that's really the more interesting part of the story for me. There's already 4 books written. Today we're actually looking at just the second of them. And I'll talk a little bit about the future of the series a little later. But one of the questions that people ask frequently is, you know, where did the Mock Revival really come from? What's it really about? And, you know, I've talked in the past about how I have these really awful migraines, and I get these rivers of images that kind of flow through my mind, and I can kind of superimpose a theme on them, and they'll start telling little stories, and I can document what I see. And there's huge chunks of the book that, in fact, have been formed just from that. And I'm sure that's some kind of horrible seizure disorder that I'll find out about later. But, and I have talked about the short story that I wrote back in 1998 that actually was the genesis for all these, but I never really talked about where the short story came from. So let me take you guys briefly back to 1998. It was kind of an interesting time in my life. Yes?
Is this a long story short or just a long story?
Well, I'll try to make it not a long story. So thank you for that. My own peanut gallery. I did not prompt him on any of this. This is just my son in his pure form. So I love you. So the short version of the short story is that you know, I was going through a really difficult period in my life. I was actually about to go through a really awful and very painful divorce. I was at odds with my community and my church and my family, and things were just really, really difficult. And there was a song that I really liked at the time called Don't Speak. It's from Gwen Stefani and her old group from No Doubt. And the story that the song talks about is the end of a relationship, the end of something significant, and the lamenting of it and the acknowledgement that it was ending. And obviously, you know, there's good reason that I was relating to that song a lot. And oddly, as I do, I put it on repeat and I put my headphones on, the little Walkman that I had at the time, and just listened to it over and over again. And you know, and music speaks to me sometimes. And that song spoke volumes. In fact, it started to create this little, it'll be short. honest. It created this story in my mind about this man, soldier, who was very broken. He was at the end of a war, and he was on the losing side of it. His family had been killed, and his friends had been hurt, and the aliens were coming in for the last attack. And the only reason he had survived at this point was because he had manifested these superhuman abilities. And he knew he could stop this attack, but he was so broken from everything that he had been through, and he was doubting himself, and then he thought about all the people that had been hurt, and he wanted to try. And he'd either stop the aliens, or he'd die trying, and in which case he'd be with his family. So he summoned his abilities and attacked as the invasion came in, and he destroyed them, but he also died in the attempt. And so he actually accomplished both sides. He did stop the alien invasion, and he was back with his family. So the character dies, end of short story, right? So I thought, wow, this is really an interesting and intense story. There's a lot more to it, but again, and even though Derek ran away, I'm trying to keep it shorter. It was a really interesting story, but I knew it wasn't just a fictional story, that it was really just a metaphor for my life at the time. As I was going through and approaching the divorce, I felt like I had lost my wife. And we didn't have kids. I always wanted to be a dad. And I thought that this had taken away my chance to be a father. And so in essence, I felt that my family had been murdered. And that came through with Rises Makari. And so I thought the whole thing was really interesting. And so I kept asking questions about the story, like, who was Rises, and who are these invaders, and what were these powers, and stuff. And as I got responses back, I created new characters and new locations and events. I saw that the theme, the seed that came from the short story about my life continued to permeate everything new. So the characters that I came up with had my strengths and my weaknesses. The demons that I fought, they fought. And the situations that I got myself into or had experienced, they did. And so it became a very intimate story. It wasn't just fiction, it was actually a reflection of my own life. So that's the actual story behind the story. As a result, it's really, the story is very important to me. It's why I can't stop writing it. I'm just so hooked into it, and I love living it. Some friends of mine know me a little bit too well, and my friend Nathan got me this for Christmas. And it says, "Careful, or you'll end up in my novel." Apparently they know that my life is my book, and therefore some of you might be in it. I'm not going to tell which. Might be in this audience. So, just to talk a little bit about then what book one was all about. So obviously there was the loss of his family. It happens in the prologue. It's not a big spoiler. It talks about the chaos of his life. Understanding who he was and what he could do, and kind of creating this new dysfunctional family. From a story perspective, you kind of get at the training aspects of his abilities, finding other Damak warriors. There's a child assassin with her little morphing pet, the techno geek with her robotic dog, the muscle-headed warrior, the woman of crystal. You get him finding allies in a place called Eden, and getting intelligence on the Nukari, which are the big bad guys. And while I gave away some specifics, those really aren't spoilers in terms of things. So, I got a great response from people when it launched out. I had many 5 of 5 reviews. The average on Amazon is a 4. The feedback that I heard from people was that they actually were able to identify with some of the characters, which actually was my hope, because the story was intended to be something that could be, I guess, empathized with. Because these were very human things from my own life, that other people could identify with those as well. And that actually turned out to be the case. People love the quirkiness of some of the characters like Toriko, my techno geek, and Alia, the little girl assassin. And they also said that they really liked the technology concepts, that they thought that they were very realistic and probable, kind of like the Gene Roddenberry, of the Star Trek, saying that, hey, this isn't too far off that these things could happen, which I thought was a heck of a compliment. I was very honored to hear that. They also mentioned that there's a couple things I could work on. And that's fantastic. Feedback is never bad. It's just about how you take it, and I want to keep improving. And so some of the things they talked about were, you had so many really great locations, but you went through them really fast. Like, you hit it and you moved on. And I'm glad they liked them because they're all reprised in the later books. So that was deliberate in a way. They wanted more character background. They wanted to know the backstories of more of the characters and not just have the introductory parts that they needed to kind of float the plot. They said people heal way too quick in your book, that they should be dead. It's like, well, okay, you know, you never know what their healing factors might be, I suppose, and it was never really talked about in the book, but I could see that. You know, it's a science fiction story, and I wanted to keep the story interested and keep it moving. And you don't want to say, you know, in chapter 6, and they went to rehab for 9 months. No, just heal and go. You know, it's fiction, right? So, you know, okay. They also wanted more Nukari presence. They said that the bad guys are not obvious enough in the first book, which was kind of the case. My intention for the first book was to show that the enemy is everywhere, and they're embedded everywhere. It's not just, you know, the great empire with an armada that's going around stomping on everything. I wanted to show a much more insidious enemy, a much more dangerous enemy. And I wanted the characters to struggle to find who and where are their enemy. You know, and not just have it be obvious. So I see what they were saying, but, you know, just to explain kind of where that came from. And they also said the branding was really too small. So, and for those of you that, you know, I'll just look it up, I guess. So it said you've got this really great picture and you've got this itty-bitty little logo and stuff on here. So I'm like, okay. And as you can see, set this thing over. This is the updated branding. It's much larger and stuff like that. So I don't want to like sidebar too much. Don't want to squirrel. I know how to do that. So let's talk a little bit about the new book, Retribution, the one that's out today. You will learn a lot more about the backgrounds of the characters in this book. It was something that was already planned because I had already written the manuscripts, but I definitely enhanced them because of the feedback. The Nukari in this book have their own super beasts that have the similar powers to Rhyssus and his group. It's always interesting to try to up the ante and the danger for your protagonists, to say, okay, well, now that you have these super beings, how do you counter them? Well, now the enemy has them too, in a way. That's also on the back of the book. That's not a spoiler. You also get to learn more about what the Nukari are doing, and you see the face of the Nukari through the commanders and other things. So again, because they said we need to see more of the Nukari, I made sure that that was a lot more prevalent in this book. You also get to learn about the Damar, the ancient race that had been wiped out. That is the source of these superhuman abilities. You learn a lot more about them in this book. And you get to meet 4 new Damak warriors that join Rhyssus' team, and I'm not going to say any more because that would be a spoiler. You know, I have a vetting process that I go through. I write it and I edit the books. I work with Arlene and she does the professional editing. And then I send the book out for reviews. There's actually some organizations that have science fiction fans that will review your book for you and give you feedback. And what I found from the first book is that when I got specific points, both good and bad, those things kept coming up over and over after the book was released. So I take the whole thing very seriously now. So in this round, I went and got the book done, sent it out for reviews, got some feedback on some rough spots, on some things that people wanted to have enhanced. I came back, made some additions and re-edits, sent it for another round of reviews, saw that I had shored up all of those issues, and then I went, okay, now we can go. So this thing's gone through a couple rounds there, and now the book is going to be in your hands. And so one of the things that I'm going to ask is, if you get a chance to read it, to please provide feedback, either coming to the Facebook page or emailing me or posting on Amazon or whatever you feel comfortable with, because that feedback is so critical to me to help shape my writing as well as shape the universe. So the things that you guys are most interested in, I can help spotlight or even put some exclusive web content out on the democrevival.com site to help extend the universe in ways that you guys are interested in that might not be a perfect match for the books. So in terms of the future, while I was at Comic-Con 2013, I won't be there this year, but I'm already talking with them and securing a booth for next year. Book 3, Dissension, will be out in December of this year. So it'll be out in just a few months. The actual manuscript goes to my editor on August 1st. So I've been hauling, and it's exciting. In fact, I was writing more of it just this morning. The engine's always turned on and going. And I can't wait to get the final book of the first trilogy in your hands. There's a lot more exciting announcements that are coming, so I'm not going to spill all the beans right now about the series, but it's not over by far. As I mentioned, I already had 4 manuscripts, so it already broke the trilogy, and there's a lot more to come. So, are there any questions? 'Cause that's kind of the end of my thing. Derek, where are you? Any questions?
Yeah, like powers, what powers do you need?
For what? What powers?
Like powers, what do you need?
For the characters, what powers do they have? Well, you know, there's actually a base level of powers that all Demok warriors have. They all have the ability to generate their own energy shield that keeps them protected. They all have the ability to fly. They all have the ability to consequently go out into space and survive. They have different types of attacks in terms of, you know, manifesting, you know, energy attacks and things. They all, but typically have their own special versions of it. That's kind of where I start comparing it to like the X-Men, where they have their own set of powers and uniqueness to them. So, yes, Eric?
Can one teleport?
No, none of them can teleport. At least not yet.
Are you having another book signing this summer?
Yeah, actually the plan is to continue to do those, especially here at the Boswell Book Company, to you know, continue that. Yes?
I read in your bio that you have worked in game design, and I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure.
How that involves through narrative trajectories.
Right.
Converge and diverge.
So, God, I'm trying to think of where to even start with that. Absolutely, I love games. Even since I was a kid, I started making games. I was not the most social when I was in elementary school, and so my 6th grade teacher decided to bring in her Commodore 64 and teach me how to code it instead of going out for recess. Love her to death, Susan Post. She was amazing. I actually learned how to code sprites and create game logic when I was in 6th grade on the Commodore 64. And you know, I was always a big fan of the Sierra Online adventure games, and I had written to Ken Williams, who it was a husband and wife team that actually created a genre of video games known as adventure games. And I wrote to Ken Williams, and he wrote back to me saying what kind of education you need and all that. And so when I went to college, I actually went into computer science because I wanted to make video games. Now, I ended up going and doing a lot more internet development and software development in corporate America. And then around 2007, I adopted Derek. I had a chance to stay home for a little while, and I had gotten involved in an online community that was trying to put together a video game. And it was called Project Top Secret. It was led by David Perry, sponsored by Acclaim Games out in LA. And there were around 60 to 65,000 of us that were participating in this online game development effort. It was an experiment to see if an online community had the smarts to actually do what a formal company usually does. And so it was about a 1.5-year effort, working on the side. I had gotten drafted into being the co-director of the effort and working on things like user interface, systems design, you know, all kinds of things. Thank you, by the way. And it also turned out to be a contest, which, you know, out of all those people that were in it, I was like, there's no way I'm going to win this thing, so I'm just going to have fun. Turns out I won the thing. And actually, it's what pulled me away from Northwestern Mutual. I was working over there in the user experience department at the time. The award for winning that was actually to go and work for Acclaim Games as the next producer and director for their titles. So I spent the next 2 years making 4 titles at the same time. The biggest title was Rock Riot on Facebook. We had about 1.5 million monthly active users. It was my game. So I designed the back end, the interface, I did the focus group testing. You know, we were working with a group called Slide that eventually was bought by Google to actually do the migration out to Facebook. And it was an amazing time. So, you know, that's kind of where I also got to work on role-playing games and RPGs online through time as well. So that's kind of where that came from. But one of the things that we were talking about right before the presentation started was after I wrote the short story for this, and I started getting little pieces of the Demok Revival universe and the characters and the locations, I actually wanted to make this into a role-playing game, like a tabletop role-playing game. And I made 24 unique modules that ultimately became the chapters of these books, and developed the gameplay system, the characteristics, you know, the whole thing. And it was a friend when I was working at March 1st, her name was Lynn Murdoch, that actually said, you should actually think about making a novel series instead of just making this a game. And so that's when I switched. And I said, well, I have all this source material. I virtually played my game and got the sequence of what became the first 3 books. So that's actually, it's all tied together.
Yeah. Along that same vein, will you make it into a tabletop RPG anytime?
We'll see. You know, the way that this thing's been constructed, you know, I've got tomes of information on all the characters and the locations. I still have all the original systems from the RPG that I initially spun up back in the late 1990s. So all the things are there. You know, but my focus right now for the moment is just to continue to get the story out, and then, you know, to see as there's interest in other forms, to extend it into other types of media. The audiobook, for instance, is an example of me already extending this concept, because there was demand for it and people really wanted it. Some people even in this room who actually helped pull together the information to help put it together, which was awesome. So thank you guys. But I'm trying to just be really, I guess, responsive to the fans, as well as just wanting to make sure that the content actually finally gets out. Okay. So, yeah.
Speaking of audiobook, when can we expect the book 2 audiobook?
That's a fair question. I have thought about that quite a bit. You know, there's some expense to working with, you know, good audio talent, voice actors, and the gentleman that I worked with, me, myself, and I, and my company, he's fantastic. But I'm kind of waiting for the first book to kind of at least break even on what I invested into it before I make the second one. So I need to actually sell around 300 audiobooks. I'm about up to 180 right now, which is really great. I mean, again, I'm still fairly unknown as an author. My series is unknown, and as a whole, I'm approaching 2,900 sales. So, you know, that's not bad. So thank you all for being part of that. Yeah.
You talked about how you have like an outline, and you had an outline for the trilogy and potentially the 4th book or more. And do you find though that as you have a plan, while you're actually writing, sometimes there are surprises to even you as the author about where your story goes?
Definitely. I'm trying not to spoil anything because I can't even talk about book 3, but I'm not Joss Whedon. That's all I'm going to say. You know, the characters surprise me. When I write, it's not me sitting there and anguishing over every single word and trying to brute force it. What I try to do is I just try to envision the characters and the location, and I hit play in my head, and I let them go. I know these characters inside and out. I know what drives them, and to me, they're like real people. And in my mind, it's like being able to watch a movie and just being there, and sometimes they do things that I don't expect. And again, there's some big things that I was shocked happened. And as I typed them, went, no, this can't happen. Like, I can't do this. And I'm like, but the characters want that. And I'm not going to override that. If that's the direction that they're taking, then I have to be true to those characters. And so I let that happen, and there's definitely fallout from some of the choices that are being made. And I roll with it. So yeah, you know, there's sometimes, you know, I've got the plan of the outline, but I stay flexible. So even in the rewrites, you know, I went back and took the old manuscripts and updated them. Things changed. And then, of course, when you make edits in book 1, then those things decide that they need to edit and ripple through everything forward. So it wasn't like I was just making one change. Because there were existing manuscripts, it's like an episode in Star Trek where you travel back in time and you change something and you watch the whole thing unwind. You're like, really? But I'm like, okay. So this is the version that you guys are going to see. All right. So great question. Yes, Derek?
Do you want to into a tornado?
No. There's no storm-like characters in this series. Yeah.
Do you want to shoot lightning bolts from his heel?
Nope, no lightning bolts from his heel. Sorry. Yes?
Do you have a favorite character?
Do I have a favorite character? Oh, that's not even fair. You know, I really I'm so attached to all of them. I mean, they certainly all came from me, right? So they're all special. Yeah, they're all my babies, right? But I think what's the most interesting is how certain characters have surprised me as I've kind of documented their history. Toriko is my techno-geek character, and I do say that lovingly. As a geek, I can say that. She has come a long way in terms of who she is. She's a major focus in book 2, and I don't want to give too much away, but I think people will really love that particular thread in the story. You know, she was someone in book 1 that was not confident, very skilled, but didn't get the opportunities and didn't have the confidence in herself to do that. And it's just fun to see these characters change and evolve. So I guess it would be Toriko. Yes, Derek?
More the long short stories?
Yeah, the long story short. Are you saying am I done talking? Is that what you're asking?
All of these long story shorts.
Oh, well, actually, it's all one long story long.
So I'm surprised that people thought more people should die, because, you know, in Star Trek, Spock, you know, I mean, they're all healed immediately. Is that Star Wars or?
That's Star Trek. Yeah, that's Star Trek. Yeah.
I'm not a super sci-fi or whatever, but I mean, you know, they're always Spock touches and whatever does whatever, and they all heal.
Well, you could even look at the reboot of Star Trek in The Wrath of Khan, more or less, and how basically they killed Kirk and used blood to bring him back, which, if you think about it, just cured every disease, including death.
Right.
It's like, just inject him with, you know, Khan's blood and you're good, man.
Why do you think they thought that? I mean, are more of the games and book stories where more people are dying?
You know, this is how I look at it. This goes back to any type of review and any type of feedback, good or bad. You have to understand the reviewer and what they're saying. Some people love hard science fiction. They want every I dotted, every T crossed. It has to be absolutely feasible. If someone was supposed to burn up in the atmosphere, that's what they expect would happen. Okay, then you've got the soft fantasy folks, or, you know, the people who are more about sci-fantasy, the ones that want more character drama, the ones that want to see something that's fun and interesting and not so reality. So there's a huge spectrum. And anytime you get feedback from people, they're going to be somewhere on that continuum. And so I'm not going to be able to make everybody happy. You know, I try to keep things as realistic as possible, but I don't want to go too far into super hard science fiction. That's not my space. That's not what these characters in this universe is all about. You know, human beings, or actually even aliens, that can radiate this energy and fly out in space. I don't really call that hard science fiction. So I'm not going to attempt to do that. But I think, going back to your question, I think that's kind of where it's coming from, is that person had a much more realistic view of what they enjoyed in their science fiction, and that's why they said that. So it's all good feedback, though. But I do know the realm in which my story lives, and so in that case, even though I got that piece of feedback, I'm not going to really change too much that aspect. So, yeah.
Well, we see in this upcoming book, you said there's going to be more. We're going to see more of the viewpoint of the Nukari, right? And well, we see like why, like their viewpoint of the universe. Why are they invading? Why did they try to invade? Like, where did they come from? Kind of thing.
So just to clarify, the only times you're ever going to see something from the perspective of the Nukari will be the prologue and the epilogue. The rest of the book itself is all from the protagonist's perspective. So you'll see them run into the Nukari, but it'll still be the perspective of Risus and his group. But I do kind of pull the curtain away in the prologue and the epilogue and give you a Nukari exclusive view of things. So, did that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and you do find out more about it in terms of the things, and as you will in additional volumes. Any other questions? Yeah.
What have you enjoyed most about this?
Wow. You know, I'm going to be really honest. I love this story so much, I love writing in it because it's a thrill to me. It's like watching a new movie like every night when I start writing, because I never know exactly what's going to be there. And I guess the other aspect of it that's probably really healthy for me is because this thing is my life in a way. When I write, it's very therapeutic. So I've put all kinds of things into here that I've dealt with and felt, and you know, things look a lot better in fictional characters than they do wrapped up inside of me. So, you know, so I guess that's another aspect that I've really enjoyed, you know, in doing the writing. Yes, Derek?
Does anybody die in the book?
Well, yes, but that's relative, and I'm not going to say who or what or whatever. You know, it's, I don't want to give spoilers. Yes. People are pretty safe in the second book, just in case. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I can't tell you how much it means to me to have all of you here and supporting. And you know, I keep active on the Democrat Revival Facebook page, on the website democratrevival.com. If you guys have any follow-up questions, want to talk about the series, or have feedback, I would love to hear from all of you all the time. So feel free to reach out. And as I mentioned, there'll be more information about the December release for Book 3, and I hope to see you guys all back out here again.
Now we should buy your book.
Well, yeah. If you haven't put your ticket